AITA for asking if another man was involved as my wife ended our marriage in front of our families. I'm Joel, 37, and I've been married to Claire for 9 years, together for 11. We have a 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, and I was usually the one who kept our household running through school pickups, appointments, grocery lists, and the shared calendar Claire used to tease me for treating like mission control. The problem was that the more distant she became, the more I tried to understand what had changed, and somewhere along the way, my questions started to be described as controlling. Claire is 35. On most school mornings, I packed Sophie's lunch while looking at that calendar on my phone. Not because I enjoyed micromanaging everyone's life, at least not the way I understood it, but because somebody had to know whether Sophie needed to be picked up at 3 or 5, whether there was a dentist appointment, whether Claire had dinner plans, whether I needed to move a work call, or whether we were out of sandwich bags again. For years, Claire liked that about me, or at least I thought she did. When we met, I was 26 and she was 24. She was spontaneous in a way that made me nervous and happy at the same time. She could decide on a Saturday morning that we were driving 2 hours for pie because somebody had told her about a place with a ridiculous apple pie. I was the guy who would check the gas level, look at traffic, and make sure we had cash for parking. She used to tell people that I made life easier. I used to tell people that she made life feel less like a list. We got married 2 years after we met. Sophie was born about 2 years into the marriage. After that, life naturally got more structured. There were daycare schedules, preschool schedules, pediatrician appointments, birthday parties, groceries, laundry, permission slips, and the 1,000 small things that make up a family, but never look important enough to be called important. I took on a lot of that organization. Over time, though, I also started handling emotional conflict the same way I handled logistics. That part is important, because if I tell this story as if Claire woke up one day and randomly decided to call me controlling, I would be lying in my own way. About 14 months before the dinner where she took off her ring, Claire told me she felt lonely. It was late. Sophie was asleep. We were in the kitchen, and Claire had been quiet most of the evening. I asked what was wrong. She said, "I don't feel like we're together even when we're in the same room." I remember feeling alarmed and immediately trying to do something useful. I asked whether we needed more time alone. I suggested getting a sitter twice a month. Then I opened the shared calendar and started looking at weekends. Claire stared at me. "I say I miss you, and you open a calendar." I closed it. "That's not what I meant." "I know. That's the problem." I asked what she wanted me to do instead. She said, "I don't need a solution every time. I need you to hear me before you start fixing it." I did hear the sentence. I remember it almost word for word because it came up later. But remembering something and changing because of it are not the same thing. I tried, for a while, to be less solution-oriented. Then work got busy. Sophie had a stretch where she was having trouble sleeping, Claire and I got tired, and I slid back into old habits. If Claire said we never talked anymore, I suggested a night out. If she said she was overwhelmed, I asked what I could take off her list. If she said she felt disconnected, I mentioned counseling. None of those things were malicious. Some of them were probably reasonable. But I understand now why they could feel like I was treating her feelings as a maintenance problem. 8 months before the ring dinner, Claire went to a birthday gathering for a mutual college friend. I couldn't go because Sophie had been running a low fever all afternoon and wanted me to stay with her. Claire came home a little after 11 and mentioned that she had run into Ryan. I knew the name. Ryan was 36 now, and he was someone she had dated briefly in college, about 13 years before all of this, before Claire and I ever met. It had never been a forbidden topic. She had told me years ago that they dated for a short time, realized they were better as friends, and lost touch after graduation. She said he was married now. His wife's name is Maya, she told me. They've been together forever. It was honestly weird seeing him. We're completely different people now. I didn't care. That sounds arrogant in hindsight, but I mean it literally. I had no objection. Claire had male friends. I had female friends. Ryan was a guy she had briefly dated when she was barely out of her teens. Claire was my wife of almost 9 years and the mother of my daughter. I trusted her. A couple of weeks later, she mentioned she was getting coffee with him. Then she mentioned another coffee. Both were during the day. Both times, she brought him up herself. She told me bits of what they talked about, college friends, where people ended up, how strange it was to see who had become parents, that sort of thing. If I had been determined to police her friendships, those would have been the moments to object. I didn't. What changed was not that Ryan existed. What changed was the role he started taking in our marriage. At first, Claire would say something like, Ryan was saying he and Maya went through the same thing after their son was born, when she and I were talking about stress. Then it became, Ryan gets what I mean. Then, during an argument, Ryan actually listens when I talk. That one landed differently. I asked, how much are you talking to Ryan about us? She folded her arms. Why does that matter? Because he's your ex. He was barely an ex. It was college. I know. I'm asking how much of our marriage you're discussing with him. She said, see, this is what I mean. I tell you I have a friend who listens, and your first reaction is to monitor it. I'm not monitoring anything. You're asking me to account for conversations. I told her I didn't care who she was friends with. I said I did care if a former boyfriend was becoming the main person she went to with problems about me. Claire said I was making a friendship inappropriate by assuming it was inappropriate. I backed off. For a while, anyway. Over the next couple of months, I noticed small changes that were individually easy to explain. Claire took longer evening walks. She texted more while we watched TV. Her phone started landing face down on the table more often. I want to be careful with that last part. I never found anything on her phone. I never went through it. Her phone was not the magical evidence that solved this. It was simply one of the things I noticed because it changed from how she had behaved before. Another change was the shared calendar. For years, Claire had been the one who got annoyed if I forgot to add something. If it affects pickup, it goes on the calendar, was basically a household rule. Then she started having evenings where nothing was on it. I would be making dinner and ask, are you going out tonight? And she would say, I told you I had plans. You said sometime this week. So Sophie has school tomorrow. I'm just asking if I'm handling bedtime. Then it would become an argument about whether she needed to file a report every time she left the house. One night she said exactly that. You don't need a report every time I leave the house. I'm not asking for a report. I'm asking if I need to be home for Sophie. You always have a practical excuse for it. That sentence stayed with me because I could see her point and still feel like my question had been reasonable. Around the same time, Claire started saying we were basically roommates when she was frustrated with me. I heard it as a description of how disconnected she felt, not as a declaration that she considered us separated. She never told me we had crossed that line. She also started asking after arguments, did you talk to my parents? Or you didn't call my dad, did you? I thought she was embarrassed and did not want family involved. I did not understand then that she was unusually protective of what version of our arguments reached them. Around then, Ryan's name appeared less. Not because I thought they were talking less. Claire simply stopped volunteering it. If I asked who she had coffee with, she might say, a friend. If she was texting and I asked whether something was funny, she would say, it's nothing. I started feeling ridiculous. The more I tried not to sound suspicious, the more suspicious I became. About 3 months before the dinner, Claire and I had a bad argument. I don't even remember what started it. By then our fights had a circular quality. Claire would say she felt managed. I would say I was trying to understand what she wanted. She would say the need to define exactly what she wanted was part of the problem. I would ask how I was supposed to change something I couldn't name. She would tell me I was turning her feelings into a deposition. That night she said she needed space and went to her sister Leah's place. Leah is 32, 3 years younger than Claire. They've always been close. About 40 minutes after Claire left, Leah texted me. She's with me. Give her the night. I replied, okay. I didn't call Claire again. I didn't drive over. I got Sophie ready for bed, found the stuffed rabbit she had somehow lost between the couch and her room, read 2 chapters of the book we were reading, and slept poorly. Claire came home the next morning. She looked exhausted. I barely slept on Leah's couch, she said. I made coffee. I didn't ask for a timeline. I didn't ask to see anything. I thought giving her space had been the mature thing to do. A few weeks later, we had dinner with Claire's parents. Her father, who had always been friendly with me, waited until Claire was helping Sophie with something in the other room and said, sometimes the best thing you can do is give somebody breathing room. I remember looking at him because the comment felt like it belonged to a conversation I hadn't been part of. I'm trying to, I said. He nodded in a way that suggested he didn't believe me. Later, Leah caught me alone near the kitchen. Do you realize how watched she feels? I said, watched how? She gave me a look. Joel. No, seriously. What has she told you? Leah said, I'm not getting in the middle. You're already in the middle if you're telling me I make her feel watched. She says you question where she goes, who she talks to, why plans change. She feels like she has to justify everything. I wanted to defend myself point by point. That is my instinct. I wanted dates. Examples. Exact wording. Instead I said, she doesn't tell me it like that. Leah replied, maybe that's because every conversation turns into an interrogation. That was the first time I understood that Claire was not describing our conflicts to her family the same way she described them to me. I did not yet know how different the versions were. I just knew I was walking into rooms where people had already formed an opinion about me. The next serious conversation Claire and I had about Ryan was maybe 2.5 months before the public separation. I had heard his name during an argument again. Claire said he had told her that feeling lonely inside a marriage could be worse than being alone. I said, I'm going to be clear because I don't think we're hearing each other. She immediately looked tired. I am not choosing your friends. I'm not telling you who you can talk to. But I'm not willing to stay in a marriage where you have private late-night conversations about our relationship with a guy you used to date while telling me I have no right to ask what's going on. Claire said, that's control with better wording. No, a rule would be me saying you are not allowed to talk to him. I'm saying I'm not willing to keep doing this if this is what our marriage looks like. You're threatening to leave if I don't behave the way you want. I'm telling you where my line is. She laughed once, without humor. You always need a definition. A line. A rule. A category. I said, because I don't know what you're asking me to accept. She looked at me for a long moment and said, you don't get to decide when I'm allowed to be done. At the time, I thought she meant done with the argument. I said, fine, and went upstairs. 6 weeks before the ring dinner, Claire and I had another fight. That one started because she had been gone most of the evening and I had expected her home before Sophie's bedtime. There was nothing on the calendar. Claire said she had already told me she was meeting someone. I said she had said she might go out. She said I was deliberately pretending there was a difference so I could justify checking up on her. We went in circles. Finally, she grabbed an overnight bag. I'm staying at Leah's. I asked, are you coming back before Sophie wakes up? Claire looked at me like the question itself offended her. I don't know. That's all I'm asking. No, it never is. She left. I got Sophie through bedtime. She asked why Mom was sleeping at Aunt Leah's, and I told her Mom needed a quiet night and would be back. A little after 10, Claire texted me. I'm staying here. Please don't call. I need one night without being questioned. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I wrote, okay. That was it. I did not call. I did not go to Leah's. I did not know Claire left Leah's house that night. I did not know Ryan's car was later parked at a hotel. I did not know anything had become physical. All of that came later. In the weeks after that night, Claire became more openly hostile to questions about Ryan, while also insisting there was nothing to question. At one point, I asked whether she still talked to him every day. She said, do you ask your friends wives how often they text people? I said, I asked you. That's the problem. Another time I asked whether she wanted to separate. Claire said, I want space. That's not the same thing. Why do you always need a label? Because we're married. She walked away. I can see now that this was the central disconnect long before I understood the rest. Claire believed she had been communicating that the marriage was effectively over because she had told me she was unhappy, lonely, done with being managed, and needed space. I believed we were in a damaged marriage that we were still, however badly, inside. She never told me, we are separated. She never told me she believed she was free to pursue someone else. She kept wearing her ring. We kept sharing a home. We kept parenting Sophie together. We still attended family dinners as a couple. She still expected me to coordinate schedules, handle errands, cover pickups, and maintain the ordinary protections of a marriage. Then came the dinner. Both our families were there. Not every relative we had, just the people closest to us. My parents, Claire's parents, Leah, Claire, me, and Sophie for the earlier part of the evening. By the time the argument happened, Sophie was in another room with my mother looking at something on a tablet. To my knowledge, she did not hear the adult conversation, and we made sure later that she never became part of the evidence or accusations. The dinner had been tense from the beginning. Claire was quiet. Her parents were polite but cool with me. My parents had noticed the tension but didn't know what was happening. I was trying to get through the meal without starting anything. Then Claire's mother asked a harmless question about an upcoming school event for Sophie. I said, "It's on the calendar. I think it's Thursday." Claire made a small sound. I asked, "What?" She said, "Nothing. I should have left it there." Instead, I said, "Claire, if you have something to say, say it." She put down her fork. "I'm done." Nobody moved. Her father said, "Claire." She reached for her wedding ring, twisted it off, and slid it across the table toward me. "I'm done being controlled." My mother looked at me. Leah looked down. I asked, "Are you saying you want a separation?" "Yes." "Is Ryan part of this?" Claire laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp and exhausted. "You just proved my point." Leah said, "Joel, don't make it uglier." I remember feeling something inside me go cold. Not rage. Not yet. Humiliation, mostly. I was sitting there with both families watching Claire turn the thing I had been worried about into evidence that I was the problem for worrying about it. Claire stood. Her mother asked her to sit back down. Claire said, "No, I've said what I needed to say." She took her purse and left. For maybe 30 seconds, everybody at the table had a different reaction and nobody knew what to do with it. My father asked if I wanted to go after her. Claire's father said, "Give her some room." Leah said, "Please don't call her right now." Then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. The message was from a number I didn't recognize. "Joel, this is Maya, Ryan's wife. I think our spouses have been telling us different stories." A second message came before I answered. "We need to compare what they told us." I stepped outside. I called her. Maya, 35, answered immediately, but she did not launch into accusations. Her first question was, "Are you and Claire separated?" I looked through the window at the dining room where my wife's ring was still sitting near my plate. As of about 20 minutes ago, apparently. Maya was silent. Then she said, "Ryan says you knew." "Knew what?" "That your marriage was over. That Claire and Ryan were figuring out what this is. He says Claire told him you understood that you two were separated except for paperwork." I had to sit down on the front step. I said, "No?" Maya asked. "No, you didn't know? Or no, you're not separated?" "Both." She took a breath. "I can tell you what Ryan told me. I can't tell you whether it's true. That's why I'm calling." That was the first reason I trusted anything Maya said. She wasn't calling like we were suddenly teammates. She sounded like somebody whose own floor had shifted and who wanted to know which parts were real. She told me she had found a hotel parking receipt in their shared car. Ryan had told her that on that night he stayed near work because he had been drinking with colleagues and didn't want to drive all the way home. The receipt didn't match his story. Maya confronted him. Ryan admitted Claire had been there. My mouth went dry. Maya continued before I could say anything. "He says nothing about this should be a surprise to you. He says Claire told him you knew the marriage was finished and that you knew they had feelings for each other." I said, "What date?" Maya gave it to me. I knew it before I checked. It was the night Claire had told me she was staying with Leah. I opened my messages anyway. There it was. "Claire, I'm staying here. Please don't call. I need one night without being questioned." Me. "Okay." I had read that message before as proof that Claire felt suffocated. Now I was looking at my own answer and wondering whether the space I had been so careful to give her had been used for something else entirely. I told Maya what Claire had told me that night. Maya said, "Can you confirm she was supposed to be at Leah's?" "I have the text." "That doesn't confirm she stayed there." "I know." Again, that mattered. Maya was careful not to make the evidence stronger than it was. The receipt proved Ryan's car had been at the hotel. Ryan had admitted Claire was there. Claire's text proved she told me she was staying at Leah's. None of that, by itself, told me exactly what happened in the room. But it was enough that I needed to know whether Claire had actually slept at Leah's house. Maya and I talked for maybe 15 minutes. She told me she was not asking me to confront anyone for her. She wanted to know whether Ryan's defense was true, because his defense depended on me supposedly knowing. I told her I had not known. That was all I could give her then. When I went back inside, everyone was waiting. Claire's mother asked, "Was that her?" "No." I picked up the ring and put it in my pocket. My father asked if I wanted to leave. I said yes. Claire's father started to say something about not escalating things. I said, I'm not doing this tonight. For once, I had no interest in solving anything in front of them. The next morning, after Sophie was at school, I called Leah. I didn't tell her about the hotel receipt immediately. I asked, did Claire physically sleep at your house 6 weeks ago? The night you told me she was with you. Leah immediately got defensive. Are you seriously keeping track of where she sleeps now? I'm asking one question. She came here because you two had a fight. Did she sleep there? You need to stop doing this, Joel. Did she sleep there? There was a pause. Then Leah said, why? Because I need to know whether what she told me was true. Leah said, she was here. That's not what I asked. Another pause. She came over. Did she stay? Leah exhaled. No. I didn't say anything. Leah rushed into the silence. She left around 10. She came back early the next morning. Where did she go? I don't know. Did you ask? She said she needed to drive. I thought she needed space. Why did you tell me she was with you? Because she was with me when I texted you. That was technically true. It also wasn't the impression the text was designed to give me. I asked whether that had happened any other time. Leah hesitated. Maybe once. Leah. One other time. She came over, left later, came back in the morning. Did she tell you where she went? No. Did she ask you to tell me she was with you? Leah said, quieter now. She asked me to get you to stop calling. I wasn't calling. I know. That was the first crack in Leah's certainty. She had believed she was protecting her sister from a husband who would not give her space. Now she was having to remember that on at least one of those nights, I had not shown up, called repeatedly, or done the things Claire had apparently made her afraid I would do. I still did not tell Leah about Ryan. Not because I was protecting Claire at that point, but because I wanted to know what Leah actually knew without contaminating it with what I knew. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I had wanted clarity for months. I finally had some, and it did not bring any relief. I felt angry at Claire. I also felt ashamed of how vindicated part of me felt. Because if Claire had lied, then maybe I had not imagined all of it. Maybe the missing calendar entries, the defensiveness, the disappearing name, the late-night conversations, the accusation that any question was control, all of it had another explanation. But proving that would not erase the things Claire had said about me before Ryan became central. I still had opened a calendar when my wife told me she missed me. I still had turned emotional conversations into structured negotiations. I still had made her feel unheard. That was true. What I didn't know yet was whether Claire had decided those truths gave her permission to invent a separation I had never agreed existed. 2 days after the dinner, Claire came back to the house for clothes and some work things. We had already agreed Sophie would be with me that night because Claire was staying with her parents. Claire moved through the bedroom with a laundry basket, pulling things from drawers. I stood in the doorway. She said, please don't. I need to ask you 2 things. I'm not doing another interrogation. I'm asking once. She stopped. I said, did you ever tell Ryan that I knew you two were involved? Her face changed slightly. Not enough that I would call it proof of anything, but enough that I noticed. No. You never told him I knew there was something between you? There was nothing to know. Did you tell him we were separated? I told him we were having problems. That's not what I asked. Claire set a stack of clothes down harder than necessary. This is exactly why I left. You hear how you talk to me. Did you tell him we were separated? No. I waited. She said, we were basically roommates, Joel. Everybody could see it. That isn't the same as telling me we were separated. You don't get to force me to stay married just because you need exact wording. I'm not forcing you to stay married. She grabbed the basket. I said, did you stay at Leah's the night you texted me not to call? Claire froze. Then she turned around. Do you hear yourself? You're keeping track of where I sleep now. I asked where you slept one night. This is sick. Did you stay there? I went to Leah's because I needed space from you. That's still not an answer. She picked up the basket and walked past me. Before she left, she said, I'm not doing this with you. I did not stop her. I did not tell her Maya had the receipt. I wanted to see whether she would tell me the truth when the question was direct and simple. She did not. That afternoon, Claire's mother called me. She was upset. Claire says you're questioning Leah now. I asked Leah whether Claire stayed at her house on a specific night. Why? Because Claire told me she did, and there's a reason to believe she didn't. Her mother sighed. Joel, the marriage can end without you proving Claire is a bad person. I'm not trying to prove she's a bad person. That's what this looks like. She told both families I'm controlling. If that is the reason she's leaving, then what she did that night matters. Her being unhappy is not a courtroom case. I agree. Then stop building one. I almost told her everything. I wanted to say Ryan's name. I wanted to say hotel. I wanted to explain that her daughter had possibly been with a married man while telling everyone I was paranoid for asking about him. Instead, I said, I'm not discussing this with you right now. Claire texted me later. Involving Ryan's wife and dragging Leah into this is obsessive. You're proving why I couldn't tell you anything. I stared at the message. There were a dozen replies I wanted to send. I sent one. Sophie's pickup tomorrow is 3:15. I'll get her unless you want to. Claire replied, you do it. So I did. That became a pattern faster than I expected. Our marriage was collapsing, and yet Sophie still needed to be picked up. She still needed dinner. She still had a spelling worksheet. She still needed someone to remember that Thursday was library day. There is something almost insulting about how ordinary life stays while your private life is blowing apart. Maya contacted me again 2 days later. She said she had confronted Ryan with what I told her. Ryan had sent her a message after they argued. Maya forwarded only the part that directly involved me. Ryan wrote that Claire had told him Joel knew the marriage was finished and knew she had feelings for Ryan. He wrote that he had believed anything between him and Claire was happening after the relationship was already over in every way that mattered. Maya called me after sending it. I'm not saying he's reliable, she said. He's trying to save himself. I know. But Claire told you she never told him you knew. Yes. That's the part one thought you should see. I read Ryan's message 3 times. I noticed the way he wrote about what had happened. He said things crossed a line. Not, I crossed a line. Not, Claire crossed a line. Things did it, apparently. Still, his self-protection did not make every word meaningless. If he was inventing a defense, it was strangely specific. He claimed Claire had told him that I knew 2 things, that our marriage was finished and that she had feelings for him. Claire had specifically denied telling him either. I thank Maya. She said, I'm sorry. I said, me too. That was about as personal as our conversations ever got. We were not becoming friends. We were 2 people with different pieces of the same mess. By then Claire's parents knew I was comparing dates with Maya, though not why. Claire told them that Maya and I were feeding each other's paranoia. Her father sent me a message asking me to stop contacting people connected to Claire's friendships. I did not respond. The irony was that I had contacted almost nobody. Maya had contacted me. I had asked Leah about a night Leah herself had inserted herself into by texting me. I had asked Claire directly. That was it. But Claire had already established a frame in which every question could be presented as escalation. I started realizing how powerful that frame was. If I asked nothing, her version stood. If I asked questions, the questions became proof. If I found contradictions, checking them became obsessive. There was no way to defend myself without looking to people who already accepted her story, like I was doing exactly what she accused me of doing. For a day or 2, I considered saying nothing. The marriage was clearly ending. I could let Claire's family believe what they wanted. I could tell my own parents that there was more to it and leave it at that. Sophie did not need a family war. Claire was still her mother. However angry I was, humiliating Claire could easily become part of the environment Sophie had to live in. Then Claire asked for a meeting. She said she wanted to discuss separation logistics at her parents' house. She wanted her parents and Leah there for support. Sophie would not be there. I almost refused. Then Claire added, I want this to be peaceful. I'm willing to do that if you stop accusing me of having an affair. That decided it. Not because I wanted a showdown. Because she was again making my silence a condition of peace while repeating the accusation in front of people she had already brought into the marriage. I told her I would come. Before the meeting, I sent Maya one message asking whether I had her permission to accurately describe the hotel receipt and the part of Ryan's message that concerned what I supposedly knew. She said yes. I did not ask for screenshots to distribute. I did not prepare a folder. I did not print anything. I had the relevant message on my phone, Claire's ordinary text thread, and the date Maya had given me. Leah had her own memory. That was enough. The meeting was the following week. Claire sat on one end of her parents' couch. Her mother sat beside her. Her father took a chair across from me. Leah sat near the dining room. Nobody looked comfortable. I brought a notebook because there were actual logistics to discuss. Sophie's school week, where Claire was staying, what nights made sense, bills, which household items she needed. Claire noticed the notebook. Of course. I said, it's for the schedule. She shook her head. Her father said, can we please just keep this calm? I said yes. For the first 15 minutes, we did. We talked about Sophie. I said I wanted her routine disrupted as little as possible. Claire agreed. We agreed not to discuss adult accusations around her, not to use her to pass messages, and not to make her choose sides. We talked about clothes and school pickup and where Claire would be staying for the next couple of weeks. Then Claire said, I also need this to stop. I knew what she meant, but I asked anyway. What? The affair accusations. The calls. Comparing stories. Ryan did not cause our marriage to end. I said, I didn't say Ryan caused every problem in our marriage. You keep making this about him. I asked if he was part of why you left. And I told you no. Her mother said, Joel, there were problems long before Ryan. I know. Claire looked almost surprised that I agreed. I continued. There were problems long before Ryan. That doesn't answer whether you lied to me about Ryan. Claire said, I'm not doing this. I said, did you tell Ryan that I knew you two had feelings for each other? No. Did you tell him I knew our marriage was finished? No. Claire's father said, why are we talking about what Ryan thinks? Because Ryan told Maya that Claire specifically told him I knew. Claire looked at me. Then she laughed once. So now Ryan is your reliable source? No. Then why are you using him? I'm not asking anybody to believe everything he says. I'm asking why he says you told him something you told me you never told him. Claire said, because he's trying to save his marriage. That was plausible. I said, maybe. Her mother looked at me as if to say, there, you have your answer. I continued. That's why I'm not stopping there. Claire's expression changed. I turned to Leah. I need you to repeat what you told me about the night 6 weeks ago. Leah looked miserable. Claire said, leave her out of this. Leah said, you already put me in it. That was the first moment Claire seemed genuinely thrown. Her father asked, what is she talking about? Leah looked at Claire, then at him. The night Claire stayed with me after they fought. She didn't actually stay all night. Claire's mother frowned. What do you mean? Leah said, she came over. Then she left around 10. She came back early the next morning. Claire immediately said, I went for a drive. Her father asked, until morning? I needed time alone. I said, Maya found a hotel parking receipt in Ryan's shared car from that night. Nobody said anything. Claire's face went still. I kept my voice level, but I was not calm inside. My hands were cold. I could hear my own heartbeat. Claire said so? Maya confronted Ryan. He admitted you were at the hotel. Claire's mother said her name softly. Claire stood up, then sat back down. She said, Ryan is lying. I said, about you being there? He is twisting it. Were you there? You are doing exactly what I said you do. You have dates and messages, and now you're dragging my sister into it. Leah stared at her. Did you use my house as an alibi? Claire looked at Leah. I never used that word. I told him you were with me. You told him that because I was with you. You left. I needed you to keep him from calling me. Leah said, he didn't call. Claire looked at me. If he knew I wasn't really staying with you, he would have shown up wherever I was. I said, I didn't even show up at Leah's when I believed you were there. Claire said nothing. Leah's voice got quieter. I thought I was helping you get space. I could see the moment Leah understood the difference between what she thought she had been doing and what Claire had actually used it for. I said, you were covering for her. You just didn't know what for. Leah looked at me, then back at Claire. Her father asked, were you at the hotel with Ryan? Claire rubbed her forehead. I was at a hotel. With Ryan? Yes. Her mother inhaled sharply. Claire immediately added, But you're all acting like this changes everything. It doesn't. Joel and I were already done. I said, we were already done? Yes. When? You know when. No, I don't. She looked at me with real anger now. For months, we were basically roommates. I told you I was miserable. I told you I needed space. I told you I was done. You told me you were unhappy. I told you enough. You told Ryan we were separated. We were. You never told me that. Claire said, you just wouldn't hear it. That was when she said the line that I think gets closest to how she genuinely saw things. We were already done. You just wouldn't hear it. I asked, then why was I the last person you told? Claire opened her mouth and stopped. I continued, because this was the part one had spent days trying to separate in my own head. I'm not saying our marriage was good. It wasn't. I know I made you feel managed. I know you told me you needed me to listen, and I kept trying to solve it. I know you were lonely. Claire's eyes filled, and for a second I hated how much I still understood why. I said, but being lonely and being separated are not the same thing when only one spouse knows about the separation. Her father looked down. Her mother said, Claire, what happened at the hotel? Claire said, I don't want to talk about this in front of everybody. I almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because she had chosen the audience. I said, you wanted them here because you said I was accusing you of something that didn't happen. I'm not asking for details. I'm asking whether the relationship became physical before the dinner where you announced our separation. Claire looked at me. Then at Leah. Then at her parents. Finally, she said, yes. Nobody moved. Claire continued quickly. It happened once before the dinner. I said nothing. She looked at me like my silence was another kind of accusation. I had already emotionally left the marriage. I understand that's how you felt. Ryan made me feel heard. I understand that too. Do you? Yes. She shook her head. No, you understand it now because you have your proof. I said, I should have listened better. I should have heard you before I opened a calendar or suggested a plan every time you told me something hurt. I am not arguing with that. Claire's mother was crying quietly. I continued. But that doesn't mean I consented to you having another relationship while we were still married and living as married people. Claire said, I wasn't asking for your permission to leave. I'm not talking about permission to leave. I'm talking about whether I knew you had left. She looked away. Her father asked, did Ryan think Joel knew? Claire said nothing. I asked again. Did you tell him I knew? Claire said, I told him we were basically roommates. That's not the question. She snapped, fine. I told him you knew things were over. Did you tell him I knew about your feelings for him? A longer pause. Yes. Leah covered her mouth with one hand. That was the point when the different stories finally occupied the same room. To me, Ryan had been just a friend, and any suspicion was proof I was controlling. To Claire's family, I was a husband who monitored her and refused to accept her need for independence. To Ryan, I was a husband who already knew the marriage was over and knew Claire was moving toward him. All three versions protected Claire from a different consequence. If I believed mine, she could keep the marriage functioning while she figured out Ryan. If her family believed theirs, she had support and moral cover. If Ryan believed his, he could tell himself he was not helping a married woman betray a husband who had no idea. I said, that's what I needed corrected. Claire wiped at her face. You humiliated me. I looked around the room. You told them I was controlling and inventing an affair. You asked to have this meeting with them here. I'm not going to post this online. I'm not calling your friends. I'm not giving people intimate details. But I'm also not agreeing to a version where the only reason this marriage ended is that I asked too many questions. Her mother said, nobody said the only reason. I looked at her. With respect, that is what I have been told for months. She looked away. Claire said, so what now? You get to be right. No. What does that mean? It means we separate. Her face changed again. For all the time she had said she was done, I don't think she expected me to say it so simply. I continued. We work out Sophie's schedule. We separate finances and household responsibilities the normal way. We do not talk about this around her. We communicate about parenting. Claire said, and us? There is no us to fix right now. She stared at me. You spent months asking me to work on this. I did. And now that you have proof, you're done? Yes. Claire stood up. So that's it. You get your proof, and now you punish me. I said no. You wanted the marriage to be over. I'm finally treating it that way. I wish I could say that line felt good. It didn't. It felt like signing something. We finished almost none of the logistical discussion that day. I left her parents' house and sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving because my hands were shaking too much. The next few weeks were not satisfying. There was no clean moment where everybody admitted I had been right and Claire had been wrong. Claire's parents stopped telling me I was imagining things, but they remained her parents. They protected her. They helped her. Her mother was polite to me, but formal. Her father apologized once for not having the whole picture, then mostly kept conversations focused on Sophie. I had been part of that family for 11 years. Suddenly, I felt like a person they had to coordinate with. Leah contacted me a few days after the meeting and asked if we could talk. We met without Claire. Leah looked exhausted. I didn't know, she said. I believe you. I swear to you, I thought she was getting space. She told me you wouldn't leave her alone. I did ask questions. I know. I'm not saying she invented every complaint. Leah looked at me. That's not what I expected you to say. I'm not going to pretend I was easy to be married to just because she lied. Leah nodded. Then she said, I should have asked more when she left. I said, maybe. I shouldn't have texted you like she was staying. No. She flinched slightly. I said, you were covering for her. You just didn't know what for. This time the line wasn't sharp. It was just true. Leah said, I thought I was protecting her privacy. I know. Do you hate me? No. Do you trust me? I thought about it. Not the way I did. She nodded. That hurt her, but she did not argue. Our relationship did not snap back into place because she apologized. She stopped automatically carrying messages for Claire. If Claire asked her to tell me something, Leah started telling Claire to tell me herself. That was probably healthier for everyone. Maya and I stayed in contact just long enough to establish the basic timeline. Ryan admitted to her that he and Claire had become physical. He also kept insisting that Claire had presented herself as effectively separated. Maya separated from him while she decided what she wanted long-term. I do not know everything that happened between them, and I never wanted to. At one point, Ryan sent me a short message. He wrote, I was told you knew. I'm sorry for my part in this. I read it and did not respond. There was nothing I wanted from him. A couple of weeks later, Claire told me during a tense exchange about Sophie's schedule that Ryan had backed away. It came out because Claire was angry that I would not discuss our relationship. She said, you know he's not even in the picture now. I said, okay. She stared at me. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? He says he can't start something while his own marriage is falling apart. He needs to deal with Maya and his choices. I could hear the disbelief in Claire's voice. Ryan had been the person who understood her, the person who listened, the person connected to a version of herself that existed before school pickups and grocery lists and the shared calendar. But once the situation required him to stand in daylight and accept what figuring out what this is had actually cost, he did not step forward into the future Claire had imagined. I did not enjoy that. It did not restore my marriage. It did not give me back the nights I had spent wondering whether I was becoming the person Claire described. It did not make Sophie wake up under one roof with both parents. It was simply another consequence neither Claire nor Ryan had fully faced while everything was ambiguous. Claire began moving her things out in stages. She took clothes first, then books, then some kitchen things we had duplicates of. We had boring conversations about chargers, winter coats, a lamp she had bought before we were married, and which house should keep the extra set of Sophie's school supplies. That was what separation actually looked like. Not one dramatic suitcase. Not an instant clean break. It was Claire texting, do you need the blender? It was me replying, take it. It was realizing later that I still had her favorite mug because neither of us had thought about it. It was Sophie asking why Mom had a different bedroom now. We told her the same basic thing together. Mom and Dad were going to live in different homes. We both loved her. None of it was her job to fix, and she would always know where she was staying. We kept the adult details out of it. No mention of Ryan. No mention of hotel receipts. No mention of who lied to whom. I was not going to make a 7-year-old carry the moral record of our marriage. The first parenting schedule we tried was awkward, but predictable. That mattered to Sophie. It also destroyed me in ways I had not anticipated. I had spent months defending the household routine because I believed routine was part of how I cared for people. Then suddenly there were mornings when there was no small backpack by the door, no cereal bowl in the sink, no argument about socks. The first morning Sophie was at Claire's after we moved into the regular schedule. I woke up and started making 2 lunches, mine and Sophie's. I had already put crackers into the second container when I remembered she wasn't there. I stood in the kitchen holding the lid. Then I put the extra container back in the cabinet. That was one of the worst moments of the entire separation. Not the hotel. Not the family meeting. Not even the ring. A plastic lunch container. Because being proven right about part of the story had done absolutely nothing to protect me from the cost. Claire and I communicated mostly about Sophie. Pickup times. School notices. Medication when she had a cold. A birthday party. Whether she needed new shoes. We were more civil when the subject was concrete. That might sound like evidence that I had been right to make everything concrete all along. It wasn't. Part of the reason concrete conversations were easier was that they didn't require emotional trust anymore. Several weeks after the family meeting, Claire asked to talk without our parents or Leah involved. We met after Sophie's bedtime on a night Claire had her. Claire looked tired. She said, "I want to try counseling." I already knew what she meant. Co-parenting counseling? No, marriage counseling. I didn't answer immediately. Claire said, "You wanted it before." I did. You said we should go? More than once. I know. So why not now? I looked at her. Because then I thought we were both still in the marriage. She started crying. I made a terrible decision. I know. I made more than one. Yes. Ryan is gone. I hated that sentence, not because I was jealous of Ryan at that point, but because it made me feel like my marriage was being offered back to me after the alternative failed. I said, "This can't be about Ryan being gone." It isn't. Then why now? Because I finally understand what I did. I believed she understood some of it. I also believed she was scared. Both could be true. Claire said, "You're making a permanent decision while you're angry." I am angry. Then wait. I shook my head. The old version of me would hear that and think waiting was the responsible thing. One more conversation. One more plan. One more way to fix it. And now I think you already made a permanent decision without telling me. That's not fair. I'm not saying this to punish you. It feels like punishment. I'll do counseling for co-parenting. I want us to be better at this for Sophie. I'm not doing marriage counseling. Claire wiped her face. So you can admit you hurt me and still leave? Yes. She looked at me for a long time. That was probably one of the hardest truths for both of us. For months, Claire had treated my failures as if admitting them should logically lead to accepting her choices. I had treated facts as if establishing them should logically lead to a solution. Neither was true. I could accept that I had been emotionally difficult to live with. I could regret the way I listened. I could wish I had changed 14 months earlier when she told me exactly what she needed. And I could still decide I was not willing to rebuild a marriage after being lied to about whether the marriage existed in the first place. We started co-parenting counseling. At first, it was painfully practical. How to handle schedule changes. How much notice to give. How to keep Sophie from feeling responsible for our moods. What to do on holidays. How to avoid using messages about Sophie as excuses to reopen relationship fights. The counselor was strict about keeping those categories separate. That helped. Maya and I stopped communicating around then. There was no dramatic goodbye. No friendship. No bond formed out of shared betrayal. She had what she needed to make decisions about Ryan, and I had what I needed to make decisions about Claire. Our contact simply faded. About 6 months after the ring dinner, Claire and I had a co-parenting session that went differently from the others. We had been discussing a schedule disagreement. It was minor. Claire wanted to switch a weekend because of a family event. I had initially said no because I already had plans with Sophie. Our old selves might have turned that into a referendum on who respected whom. Instead, we found another date. Then Claire said she wanted to say something that was not about the schedule. The counselor asked if I was okay hearing it. I said yes. Claire looked at me. I told different people different versions. I waited. She said, I told my parents the version where you were controlling because that made it easier to explain why I was pulling away. I told Ryan we were basically separated because that made what I was doing with him feel less wrong. And I told you he was only a friend because I didn't want to deal with what would happen if I admitted it. It was the first time I had heard her describe it without immediately adding what I had done wrong. She continued, You did make me feel managed sometimes. I know, but I used that as the explanation for everything. I said nothing. She said, I'm sorry. It was not a perfect confession. She did not suddenly say the entire marriage had been my fault or her fault. She did not ask me to come back. I did not forgive every part of it in one dramatic moment. I just said, Thank you for saying it that way. And I meant it. Claire nodded. Then we went back to talking about Sophie's school schedule. That might sound anticlimactic. It was actually the first conversation we had in months where I didn't feel like one of us was trying to control the official version of the past. Our life now is smaller than the one I thought I was protecting. Claire has her home. I have mine. Sophie has a predictable schedule between us. She keeps some clothes at each place and complains that she can never remember which house has the purple hoodie. Claire's parents are still in her life and Sophie's life. They are civil with me. The warmth we had before is mostly gone. Leah and I are better than we were right after the separation, but not back to where we were. Ryan is not part of my life. I don't know whether he and Maya will ever reconcile. Last I heard, they were still separated and figuring out what they wanted. Claire and I are not friends. We are becoming decent co-parents. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to hear Sophie. Sometimes the quiet catches me before I remember whose day it is. A few weeks ago, I opened the shared family calendar to add one of Sophie's school events. The calendar still has years of our old life in it. Appointments, birthdays, dentist visits, soccer practices, dinner plans, and then, in those last months, gaps, evenings with nothing entered, changed plans, blank spaces I used to stare at and try to reconstruct. For a second, my thumb hovered over the previous month. The old instinct was still there. Go back. Check. Understand. Make the timeline complete. Instead, I switched to the current month. I added Sophie's school event. I checked which house she would be at that day. Then I closed the app. The calendar is simpler now, and it tells the truth. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.